Story 1. Literally fucking anything. I could not shut up for 20 minutes, but that is a different question. Story 2. How unprepared I am to give a 20-minute talk. I'm sure I could do 30 minutes. Story 3. The music and history of the Baroque trumpet before 1721. Story 4. I was a college teacher, so I can bullshit for 20 minutes without breaking a sweat on topics such as ham radio and elevators. Story 5. Warp field theory and its relation to starship design in Star Trek. I have diagrams. Story 6. Stargate Command Team 1 and Atlantis. The Lord of the Rings. Palea. And hamburgers. Story 7. Algorithms are further dividing us politically by bringing us completely different realities, one doom scroll at a time. There are about 12,000 hours of Charlie Kirk footage available. Some of you see him at his worst. Others see him at his most reasonable and kind. None of you are seeing a lie, you are just not seeing the full picture. Story 8. The time I died in Mexico when I was 18 and what that meant for the rest of my life. Story 9. I love books, especially my staff picks. I work at a bookstore and get excited when someone looks at them. I often go over and talk to customers, becoming visibly enthusiastic about the book and how great it is. The two biggest ones are Piranesi by Susanna Clarke and the Scythe trilogy by Neil Shusterman. Story 10. Robotics. Humanoid robots. Impact of artificial intelligence on the workforce. Manufacturing. Story 11. The end of true journalism and the rise of propaganda in the corporate media as a cover for corruption. Division in American politics as a distraction from corruption. How corporate donors eroded United States democracy. Abusive labor practices, rising unemployment, the United States homeless crisis, and a declining consumer base. Corporate bailouts and subsidies and how a corporatocracy is just socialism for corporations. The erosion of healthcare, labor laws, and disability rights in the United States. The United States doctor shortage, medical gaslighting, malpractice, and corruption in United States healthcare. The abandonment of vulnerable Americans, including the sick, the disabled, and abused children. Attachment disorders and empathy. How abused children grow up to develop personality disorders and how better parenting and stronger child protection are the only ways the world will change for the better. Story 12. How to manage your money. I don't have credentials, but I wish I could visit every high school in my region and talk to students about money in an informal setting. I believe that having a community member who is not a teacher, parent, or family member answer questions about the often taboo subject of money would be very helpful. Story 13. I am likely on an undiagnosed spectrum and may have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I can talk non-stop for hours about anything, whether I know anything about it or not. Story 14. Flamingos. 100%. What started as a bit for Halloween 5 years ago has turned into an entire personality. I love these stupid pink birds. Story 15. I did it on weekdays for over 30 years. How to write and edit essays for clarity. Story 16. Graphic design, generational trauma, snowboarding, and The Wire. Story 17. What happens when you grow older and have no family support? I work with senior care facilities. The number of people who are alone is very sad. Story 18. Let me grab you a chair, some water, and a snack. We are diving deep into the worlds of fantasy and science fiction. Story 19. I like wine, horses, dogs, art, Star Wars, cooking, gemstones, gardening, politics, fashion, spiders, and grunge music. Damn, why am I still single? Story 20. Random animal facts. I could go on for hours about the fascinating and unusual animals in South America. The maned wolf looks like a fox mixed with a wolf, but is its own species in the family Canidae. It has unusually long legs that help it see over tall grass, and zookeepers have called the police because its urine smells distinctly like marijuana. Story 21. I know I am not alone. Some of us here are ready and ask, what do you want to talk about? While staring. Story 22. The history of blackface and its cultural impact on broader entertainment are important to understand. As a cosplayer, I have had to explain it far too many times. Story 23. The paranormal is real-life fantasy. It does not hurt anyone, and it is not as depressing as politics. Story 24. My childhood and where I grew up included rock music, drums, and Super Smash Bros. Story 25. How big of a douchebag Donnie is and how the Make America Great Again movement is neither conservative nor Republican. Story 26. The First Cold War. I am a 20th century history buff. Story 27. My dogs and dogs in general. The state of animal rescue in Arizona and the United States. Writing grants for animal rescues. There is always one person who ruins everything, ensures your failure, or stands in your way, hereafter called fucking Debbie. Story 28. Growing food, gardening in general, birding, and world politics. Do not get me started. Story 29. The more I learn and study, the more I realize I do not know much. Arachnids or reptiles and amphibians would probably be my go-to. Story 30. The interconnectedness of systems that can make a society great or render it fallible. Story 31. Little penguins are the world's smallest penguins, reaching about 30 centimeters, 1 foot, in height. Blue and white, they nest in colonies along the southern coasts of Australia and New Zealand. Story 32. Ghosts and various unsettling experiences. To be honest, 20 minutes is not enough. I need the whole day. If I had only 20 minutes, it would have to be something related to translation theory or linguistics. Story 33. 1980s heavy metal, considered hard rock by millennials, but it remains true to the genre. Story 34. Cats, photography, motorcycles, African art, seashells, cacti and succulents, travel and hiking, motorcycle Grand Prix. Story 35. Manure. You cannot expect people to listen when you do not know anything. Story 36. The lore of Genshin Impact and why Farina is my favorite character in light of that lore. Pokemon battle mechanics and consistent strategies, discussed in light of Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Stadium 2 rental Pokemon system. The connection of narrative devices between modern Isekai anime and a selected group of 3 influential early Isekai works. Whether a hot dog served on a bun should count as a sandwich. Basic engineering ethics, referenced in light of whichever novel or anime I am thinking of at the time. I miss college, when my ethics teacher and I would discuss the philosophical arguments and ideas presented by various anime. Story 37. Almost everything related to history, art, the environment, nature, climate change, and politics. Story 38. I make smart remarks about taking care of my plants and think I am very good at it, but I probably do what everyone else does. Story 39. The Phantom of the Opera, either the novel or the musical, but especially the novel. Story 40. Football, the process of distillation or fermentation, my child, memes, anything that is funny, politics, war, investment strategies, how stupid gun laws in the United States are, and so on. Story 41. Taylor Swift, the Roman Empire, the Legend of Zelda, and Pokemon. Story 42. I can't promise it will be good, informative, or correct, but I'll be able to talk about it. Story 43. The joys of having had an American bulldog as part of my family for 10 years. Story 44. Government corruption, global warming, aliens, taxes, educational issues, black holes. The list goes on, and my blood pressure rises when I think about most of them, except for space. Story 45. The Phantom of the Opera. I could talk about that for 20 minutes. The musical and the book. Story 46. Oh, the normal stuff. Cults, sightings of unidentified flying objects, my conspiracy theories. Story 47. Just about any topic in mathematics. Coaching the zero splits double wing offense in American football. How to avoid being punched from the Brazilian jiu-jitsu guard position. The history of the Beatles. How to teach state and national education standards in a mainstream secondary classroom without turning your program into a test-taking mill. How to play the guitar. Story 48. The jailhouse match from SummerSlam 1991 between the Mountie and the Big Boss Man, in which the loser had to spend a night in jail. Story 49. The Primarchs and other elements of Warhammer 40,000. I am 130 books deep. Story 50. Orchids, kittens, Newfoundland dogs, movies, and Pez collecting. Story 51. The myth of closure after the violent death of a loved one. Story 52. Random fun facts about Greek mythology and neuroscience. Unstructured theory crafting about the Dresden Files or Season 3 of Interview with the Vampire. Story 53. I do not know about myself, but my son plays Minecraft unprompted for more than 20 minutes daily. Story 54. Metal music and all other music with a strong emphasis on heavy metal. Story 55. Cats, coffee and the coffee business, cannabis, my toxic exes, American Horror Story, movies, and more. Story 56. I work as a printing press operator. Would anyone know what I am talking about? Probably not, but I really enjoy my job. Story 57. Cacti and succulents. Scientific names and how to care for the different species. Story 58. I never start a conversation without preparing. I think about what I am going to say. Story 59. Cats and Grand Slam champions in the last 20 years. I could talk 15 minutes straight about Stan Wawrinka's Grand Slam run. Also about those little box-pooping, furniture-scratching demons. Story 60. Definitely religion, politics, and movies. 2 out of 3 are not encouraged most of the time. Story 61. Give me a problem to solve and a deadline. I will tell you how we are going to solve it. Story 62. I am not really interested in giving a 20-minute talk unless I am required to do so at a conference. Story 63. I do not know about myself, but for everyone else it is their children or pets. Story 64. Anatomy and physiology, cellular and molecular biology, and beekeeping. Story 65. Honestly, I find serial killers fascinating, and I have an obsession with true crime. I know way too many facts that no one should know, and that is okay. Story 66. What happens when your home loan goes into default? And what are your options? I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs for 13 years, and this is what I handled. I can see it happening again soon. Story 67. Baseball. Magic: The Gathering. World of Warcraft. Driving a dump truck. Brisket. Pulled pork. My wife's tits. Story 68. Yeah, I do not know. I tell my coworkers that I could probably talk myself through 4 hours of stand-up meetings, especially if people asked questions. Story 69. Photography, Linux, and possibly sailing, although the latter may be difficult to fit into the time frame. Story 70. Ancient Egypt, Rome, Greece, the Celtic period, what medieval life was really like, cats and dogs, how to train animals. Story 71. Space is vast, and black holes are astonishing. We cannot begin to comprehend how enormous the universe truly is. Story 72. Many aspects of music include Bulgarian folk music, Beatles songs, George Russell's Lydian chromatic concept of tonal organization, and classical music. Story 73. Anything, as long as I'm not being asked to advocate for a platform or stance I fundamentally do not support. I could still do that for 20 minutes, but I would refuse to on principle. Story 74. Science fiction show and cop show mashups. Homicide, Life on Deep Space Nine. Law and Order, Babylon 5. Starfleet Criminal Investigative Service. Story 75. Cooking and baking tools, why Harbor Freight is better than tool truck vendors and weightlifting. Story 76. Godzilla and how different iterations relate to different nuclear fears. Story 77. Star Trek and its relationship to anything of your choice. Go on. Give me a topic and I will make it happen. Story 78. Give me a topic I know nothing about and I can riff forever. Some people can do it, some people cannot. The topic could be gay llamas that only eat children's breakfast cereal because they are strict giants. I have at least half an hour on that. Talk about a random rock you found this morning. I have a solid hour, unprompted. I am a talker. It is how I make my living. I could speak about your question for an easy 45 minutes and can stretch it to an hour or more. I can keep talking until you want to kill me. Story 79. I have to do this daily for work. You develop a knack for it. Story 80. This boil I have on my butt. For real. Fellow sufferers gather round. For I have a tale of woe to share. A saga of betrayal, a testament to the fact that even in the most protected and padded regions of one's anatomy, disaster can strike. This is a boil, not just any boil, but a full-on nuclear reactor-level eruption on the south face of my personal mountain range. It started innocently enough. A slight pressure, a tiny nagging feeling that perhaps I had sat on a particularly unforgiving pebble. In my infinite ignorant bliss, I dismissed it as a tender spot. That pebble was no pebble. It was a seed of pure evil planted deep in the fertile soil of my buttock. The next day, the pressure was no longer slight. It became a throbbing, pulsing tyrant demanding attention. Every step was a negotiation. Every sit-down was a carefully orchestrated diplomatic mission. You know that moment when you ease into a chair and get a little zap? Mine was a lightning strike, a symphony of pain conducted by a demonic orchestra. It began to develop a personality. I swear it did. It was no longer just a bump, but a small angry being with the agenda of making my life a living hell. It flared up at the most inopportune moments. Standing in line at the grocery store, forcing me into a lopsided posture like a flamingo with a vendetta, and during work meetings, forcing me to shift from one cheek to the other with all the subtlety of a maraca player on a unicycle. Story 81. N-dimethyltryptamine and spiritual awakening. Yes, I am the person many of you dislike. Story 82. Daylight saving time. As a programmer, I hate it. Story 83. I am on the spectrum. Anything I start to talk about is either a couple of clipped syllables because I am not really interested in the subject, or 20 minutes of nonstop gabbing. Story 84. How the shutdown standoff is the wildest game of chicken ever, and the Republicans are basically saying, come to the table or we are going to unleash hungry poor people in the suburbs. Prove me wrong. Story 85. This question has come up several times in real life for me. The answer is always the same: Halo lore. I am a big nerd. Story 86. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and how it affects your life when it is undiagnosed or when it is diagnosed. Story 87. Food safety and sanitation. I go out a lot, and the shit I see in restaurants, even good ones, is unbelievable. I'm not a fan of the overused trope, do better. But come on, people. Story 88. Martial arts, computer infrastructure and system planning, gaming. Story 89. Houseplants, tissue culture. I am a master gardener, and it is also one of my hyperfocuses related to autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Chicken and goat keeping. I used to raise and vaccinate my own animals. Folklore and mythology, healthcare and medicine, politics, the military, based on lived experience, music, and art. Story 90. Computers or my life story, which is fairly interesting. Story 91. Death metal and black metal, their respective histories. I have a solid half hour on each. Story 92. The disintegration of democracy in the United States of America, from Ronald Reagan to today. Story 93. The history of the Sith, as told by the Star Wars expanded universe before it was declared non-canonical, is fascinating. I could elaborate specifically about Darth Plagueis. It is one of my top novels of all time, Star Wars notwithstanding. Story 94. It is probably about how our understanding of primary texts written in different languages tends to portray women in a mostly sexist light because 99% of the people translating them are men. Because of the subjectivity of language, a substantial portion of the original meaning is lost in translation. This is quite disappointing. We do not have direct translations, so translators choose the closest word, and that choice is often open to debate. Story 95. When I meet my friend, we often talk for about 3 hours about our dogs and our lives, laughing out loud. Story 96. Genealogy, Breyer horses, bare-naked ladies, United States history and politics. Story 97. Elder financial abuse. My sister stole all my parents' assets. Story 98. About my thrifting journey of around 17 to 18 years. I am almost 29 years old. Story 99. This includes fighter aircraft, especially the General Dynamics F-111 Aardvark and the Grumman F-14 Tomcat, as well as Star Trek starships. Story 100. Dogs, computer-aided design, myself, education, backpacking, the National Football League, lacrosse, and cooking. I would probably keep going, but I will dox myself. Story 101. Why chiropractors are scam artists trying to sell you stuff. Story 102. I am disabled and curious, so I have some knowledge of a wide range of topics, from psychology and video games to history and philosophy. Story 103. My job is to be available to talk about aquifers and watersheds for hours when needed. I have also led guided birding walks, taking people through the woods for an hour while discussing birds. 20 minutes of talking would be easy. Story 104. Custer's Last Stand, horses, Springer Spaniels, and British sports cars from the late 1960s and 1970s. Story 105. Aliens, non-human intelligence, unidentified aerial phenomena, dreams, animals, artificial intelligence, how it actually works, the occult, specific anime, specific books, math and physics, plants, and questions. I can unload an unfathomable number of questions about anything to the point that I could make you hate your favorite topic, apparently. I'm sure there's more. There are also some subjects I can't recall right now that make me go blank because I either don't care or simply can't fathom any input about them. I've come to realize, though, that this happens more with specific people than with topics themselves. Story 106. I am working on an encryption algorithm. Yes, the username really does check out. I can give lectures about my Minecraft world, my past, myself, and computers. 20 minutes is not enough. Last time I talked for 4 hours about my Minecraft world. That was almost 6 years ago. Since then, a lot has been built. Story 107. I am afraid of almost anything. It would not be of much value to anyone, though. I just talk too much. Story 108. I enjoy books I love, movies, and video games, especially Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, and Expedition 33. Story 109. Mystery Science Theater 3000. I've watched about 100 to 150 episodes per year over the last 20 years. Story 110. Skateboarding, Batman lore, missing 411 cases. Maybe I should take a test. Story 111. Unidentified aerial phenomena, national health insurance, basketball, and how terrible a for-profit healthcare system is for its citizens. Story 112. There is so much child exploitation on the internet at the hands of parents. I could talk about this all day. Story 113. My perspective on the impact of jersey color on the outcome of a National Football League game. Story 114. How Wizards of the Coast ruined eternal formats in Magic: The Gathering. Story 115. Demon Slayer, Devil May Cry, Inuyasha, and World of Warcraft. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.